The re-education does not teach a person to finish a degree and get a job. The re-education teaches a man or a human being to understand the world he lives in. The reason why I have to insist that nations cannot develop without God is because the only person with first-hand information about everyone's life, every nation's life, every dream's life is God.
What are the approaches that God puts in place to heal Israel and prepare it to take over the economy in Israel? The approaches.
Yes, there are so many. There are so many ways or approaches that God employed to transform former slaves into the best economy and civilization of the time. At the time of their departure from Egypt, Egypt was a superpower, but God brought it down by just supernatural upon Moses, just using the supernatural. He unleashed such weapons today we call biological weapons, lice, frogs, and so on and so on. But along the way, God made a stopover on a mountain called Mount Sinai. And Mount Sinai became a place to reset, to transform slaves into free people, delivered and free. You can be delivered. Let's say someone snatches you out of water, but you're still not free from what water has done to you. So a recovery process takes longer than a departure. A nation gets independence, 1962 for the case of Uganda. But to transform a nation now after 63 years, you look at Uganda, so many things are still lacking. So when God brought them on Mount Sinai with the great leader, Moses, Moses had acquired great education in many areas, in physics, in math, in literature, in Egypt. But this time around, God is giving them a language. They are to write not in the Egyptian language, but Hebrew language. So when God brings them on Mount Sinai, he employs, first of all, education. And this enrollment did not separate people, that these are children and these are elderly. All the people as a nation, they were enrolled into that education. Now, God's education had three distinctive approaches. The first one was that God personally wrote on the tablets and the things on the stones. The things he wrote were instructions, were laws, were precepts that Moses had to teach. In other words, every child of Israel, every person in Israel had to look at these tablets. And when they look at them, they must appreciate that there is writing and reading. They must learn writing and reading. But the law written on those two tablets had three aspects: the spiritual, the moral, and the legal. So those are three areas. But now we want to go into details of moral, legal, something constitutional, legal. What may be legal accepted in Africa may not be in Europe. And then the moral. Moral standards are universal. But in some cases, someone, because the law says otherwise, he will do something, say, but the law here, so there is a confrontation between the legal and the moral. And then the understanding of the spiritual laws. So the first was to write. And so they would be taught as students in class. Moses goes and downloads what we call in the modern language download, and then he comes and teaches those three areas I've mentioned. The second approach was observation. that God painted Mount Sinai in such a way with the sounds and sights that they would have to practically see, observe with their natural eyes. It's one thing to teach me something that you're telling me, and it's another thing for me to learn something that I'm watching. So a better student learns by watching. But the third approach is here what I want us to take note of. God had them eat. So the word of God was written, was displayed to hear and see, and also was eaten. It's called manna. Someone who has tasted the juice is different from someone who is learning about juice.
Very true.
So the word here was eaten, was seen, and was taught. Now, in the process of teaching, God gave Moses the first year on that Mount Sinai, God gave him an assignment to build a civilization, what we call a tent or a tabernacle of meeting, a tent, a building. And the structure was detailed in such a way that the, the dwelling and settlement of the 12 tribes depended on how it is designed. That it is designed in such a way to know where water shall be stationed, where the church is stationed, where the army is stationed, where the mothers are stationed, where the tribes that prophesy, those who will be speaking to give directions, are stationed. The 12 tribes would surround this tabernacle. In 1 year, they gathered resources from within, what we call internal sourcing. They sourced resources. Within the first year, they learned almost the purpose of every natural resource on earth in 1 year. They learned how to use gold, what gold does, what silver does, what bronze does, what linen does, what cotton does, what everything in 1 year. And that is the greatest education. That without going outside, not the so-called development partners, God said, with what you have, what can you do? Do you not get these three approaches? The written was not to just be written, was to be done. If you do what you have heard. So God gave them a practical experiment. I want you to build a tent where you meet. It must have the lights. You must now learn to produce oil. Right in the first year, it will have tables. It will have bread to display, what we call the show bread. Just in 1 year, you will make clothes for priests, for those who have priests. You will build an altar and learn to set fire. You will find the fire within 1 year. As you will realize, the civilization of man begins with the discovery of fire. And the science teaches that when they found fire and roasted food, and they ate roasted food, their brains, the formation of the brain, the activities of the brain, the functions of the brain suddenly changed, what we call evolution. When they ate roasted or cooked food, there was an evolution in the brain. And so they tell us that that affected even the formation of the head, the skull. So think about 1 year, which you in Uganda spend in kindergarten. How much a 1 year kindergarten after 3 terms can produce? So,
Just learning
so
to talk.
here we have the kind of education. When you go, someone was telling me a story in Israel. A 4-year-old boy, a tourist was moving around and wanted to pluck a tree, a small flower, just out Israel 99 is, I mean, about 95 is a desert. They water it and they plant those flowers for people to see for what beauty and all that. Someone looked at the flower and wanted to pluck it and smell on it. And the boy of 4 years answered him in a language that the tourists had never heard. And the tourists didn't hear what the child is saying, don't pluck it. What will happen when another person, you know how many people pass here every a 4 year challenging someone in 40s, spoke the first language, the person didn't get. The boy changes into another language, the person doesn't get it. A 4 year changes a third language, and on the fourth, the child began to speak a little of English. That's where the person get it. A 4-year-old knows four languages, and he's speaking about the preservation of this,
climate,
how the weather, the climate, how it relates to the beauty of the nation, and the production of the rest of the sciences, the cycles of how to produce rain, so on and so forth, subsequently falling into the creation of food and sustaining a nation's economy. So you see, a 4-year-old understands that dynamic of economics now. So economics is not showing people money and telling them that when you finish university, actually the re-education does not teach a person to finish a degree and get a job. The re-education teaches a man or a human being to understand the world he lives in. You understand? To understand, to appreciate what gold is and does, to appreciate what linen, to appreciate the colors, to appreciate the beauty, to appreciate the medicines within all these herbs and trees and all that, to appreciate the environment. Can he treat himself with this environment? So that kind of education is the Bible kind of education. Unfortunately, I must say, unfortunately here, that even in the church, this is not what is taught. Why? Because even many people in church have not understood the language of God, the language of the Bible. So it is not only a problem to nations that have emerged into independent states after the colonialism coming into Africa from Europe and so on. The problem is even those handling the Bible. So the Bible is a book of liberation. It speaks little about creation. Creation is only covered in 2 chapters to give us an introduction of what really happened. And so the rest of the Bible chapters and books address the recovery. So this is the return from the fall. It's the type or the image is that from Egypt to the promised land. You understand? The first year, the Bible doesn't say that some people failed. All of them passed. Those who were given to make lamps, they produced lamps. Those who were assigned to produce oil, they produced oil. After producing oil for the house of God, would you fail to produce oil for yourself? And would you consume polluted or toxic oil when you have ability to make oil for yourself? So that is the educated person. It's quite long. I wish I could answer another, because another question, because this is deep, the Mount Sinai, and even Mount Sinai had 4 levels. Moses ascended to the highest level in the cloud. We have very few who can ascend higher because of the price you have to pay. How many would you study if you were to enroll for PhDs? People are struggling for certificates. Then the 3rd level had the follower of Moses called Joshua, the pretty G. Those who are following what is happening. They are learning at level, the 2nd level, which is following someone and learn by association. At the formation of this education, which we call modern, the Greeks, who are the founders of this modern, where we have the Rema, one-on-one. What I'm saying here is called the Rema. The word I speak, the words coming from a living voice is called the Rema. But the Bible Christians mostly use it to mean a word from God. But Rema means a voice speaking right now. And so they also designed that which you could receive anywhere, and that written or somewhere left is called logos. And logos would be that It's information already deposited somewhere. It wasn't as expensive as the education which you get direct from a person. So Joshua learns from Moses before Moses is gone, and Joshua begins to receive direct from God. So Joshua was level 2. Then below Joshua were 70 elders, the leaders of the masses left at the bottom. So masses will always be at the bottom. It is the level of knowledge that then liberates you from bottom to the next, to now following the person who is directly receiving from God. And then you go to the highest is you receiving direct from God. So we will teach, but limited, focusing your mind and spirit to a position where you can hear for yourself from God. The richest people, billionaires you see, did not copy and paste an idea from a scholar, a professor. After speaking all the laws of Newton, the physics, the chemistry, the what, God, in one way or the other, spoke into their minds. I've been told about 80% of inventions, people, the things they have invented, came to them in form of dreams. Even planes, aeroplanes, those that are called Wright brothers, White brothers, they dreamed one of them, something that could transport people in the air. Now, speaking in dreams, the Bible teaches us that God speaks to us in dreams. So the best way God will communicate to a human being, whether they know him or not, gives them a dream. And they pursue a dream. Some dreams are audible, that I'm sleeping, I've heard a voice. Some are visual, I see a video of sort in a dream. And some dreams are inspiration. I get an inspiration in my heart. Can't I change this village? Something becomes very strong, a conviction in my heart. And that is God speaking to you direct. It's the highest form of learning where you get first hand. Where you get first hand. So everything we are doing here is to facilitate you. The reason why I have to insist that nations cannot develop without God is because the only person with first-hand information about everyone's life, every nation's life, every dream's life, it is God. All of us are limited. What you call new and reading it now as latest, someone has been reading it 4 years ago. It has only landed to you today. You have only seen it today, but it's something very old. But God has capacity to give you something of its first kind, first time. So that's why it's important that whether you're a scholar studying the laws of physics or you're a lawyer wanting to understand what would be the practical laws to govern a society, human beings, the understanding has to come, has to be direct from God. So the ability to hear God, a nation must be shepherded, just as a shepherd takes care of a flock. Understand? Any other question?
We shall have a final question.
Yes.
About tribalism.
Yes.
God
Someone,
actually divides the nation of Israel into tribes.
Yes, I do. Pardon?
God divides the nation of Israel into tribes.
Yes.
The same tribes or the same system of administration that God uses to decentralize power and to make governance effective in Israel is actually making Africa a very difficult place where finding unity is so difficult. Then in South Africa, we're having things like xenophobia. Fellow black Africans are chasing our fellow black Africans because of tribalism, ethnicity, and all that. How comes that the same problem that is making administration in Africa difficult is the same approach God is using to make governance effective in Israel?
Simple answer. First of all, the 12 tribes of Israel, they all struggled until they appreciated the differences, and each of them specialization. The sons of Levi went into priesthood. The sons of Judah, they are royal family. The sons of Issachar, they are prophets. Sons of So, they are troops, they are fighters, they are warriors, until they appreciated the different giftings and the complementary abilities among these various total of tribes. That my being a teacher complements your skill to build a classroom or the ability to mobilize. I may be a teacher, but not a mobilizer. When you mobilize people, I can teach them. But when you send me to mobilize, I'm gone, I'm finished. So the 12 tribes, at the formation when they were finally made, from now, after Abraham, Isaac, at Jacob level, the three fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and they become now 12, he had 12 sons. The first thing they saw, their own brother. And that's what is happening in Africa, betrayal, because we are still young and we think that the climbing higher will depend on how many you bring down. So the struggle to, Joseph had a dream that they were together in a field, they were tying sheaves, they were harvesting wheat, and in the middle his sheaf stood. And when it stood, the rest of the 11 brothers fell down in kind of prostrating, worshiping it. They interpreted that as dominion and they looked at themselves as inferior. But in the actual sense was that we were working and we were all prospering, but I prospered higher. And so, if you bow under authority, real true authority, you are safe because authority's primary work is to protect, not to destroy. Now, people failure to interpret the responsibility of dominion. Always, when you say, I will have dominion, they look at you as though you're about to be a tormentor. So, dominion in most cases in the world, be it in the Roman Empire, Greece, Egypt, has always been used to torment. So, when Jesus comes to teach how the kingdom, the right way of doing things works, he says, the greatest among you be a servant of all. So that dominion is used to serve. When the higher you go, the more needs you meet. When you grow more food, you save many people from famine. That's exactly what Joseph was showing them, that I will help many. But the interpretation as it is today, even in Africa, they thought that he is going to rule over them and they will be inferior. He is pushing them, sitting on them, so on and so forth. So nations grow in four phases. All these, some of them are written in my books. They grow in 4 phases. The first is family level. If you don't lay a strong foundation for the family, you don't have the next. The next are called tribes. They are tribes, that's where diversity now starts to be manifested, where we begin to see differences. That this one is a gifted runner, but this one is a gifted scholar. And we need to live together, your speed and my ability, my intelligence as a scholar. So the second level is where we become tribes, where we become branches on the same tree called the family. At the higher level, these branches begin again to be, there's what we call cropping, where you cut a branch and plant it. As you clone, you crop, and that branch becomes an independent tree. You understand? So that third level, you become independent, where many African nations are independent. That at that level, there is pressure, and you begin to seek. It is designed by God, nations to undergo slavery. Why? Because that's when they will appreciate independence, because of the fall and the rise of man. Otherwise, we would go like that without having to go into the colonialism. But when you're being oppressed, there is an internal strength that is born. There is a desire in you to find you. You begin to long for freedom, and that gives you restlessness. You work hard, you move yourself. So the third level, you become a nation. When a nation works itself, gets its up together, works discovers its abilities, its resources, develops its own industries and abilities, they become a kingdom. A kingdom is the highest level of human society. Nations like US don't need a king. Their president is greater than any other king on the planet. Why? Because they have developed economy, they have developed military, they have developed all the other education industries, and so the president of US is stronger than the king of UK somehow to believe. The other one is hereditary, but this one is a position they have created at White House. Why? Because the nation is richer. I was watching the US's defense budget is the total annual budget of UK, the whole of almost the defense budget for US,
One ministry.
one ministry is the same amount that UK will spend for all the other on all the other ministries, all the departments, with all the UK aid and all the other things, many as they may have. Just defense. Why? Because they are developed. So the pride of the Americans living American dream depends on what they have been built to become. That's why everyone is fighting to become an American, because they have the last 400 years since the arrival of the British, the 100 and about 11, the Puritans, the Christians who carried the Bible and said, let's go and establish a civilization based on the Bible, went to US, they arrived in Boston and started a Bible teaching class, which now emerged into what we call Harvard University, the greatest university on the planet, most prestigious university. But all the idea was born from the Bible. They say here in UK there is already a king. We cannot build, we are fighting a culture. Let's go to a cultureless. People who are still moving in certain ways, organize them into a civilization based on the Bible truth. And they have done. When you look at America, leave alone the deception now, the immorality, homosexuality, and all these other things where evil keeps on infiltrating, comes in. But the foundation, they always have said one nation under one God. And the first presidents of US, all of them, the inclination was to the scriptures, to the Bible. And so that is the royal dimension. You don't need to have a real king and a crown. If you crown your citizens with wisdom, crown their homes, how they live, how they eat, what sort of foods and drinks they consume, then these are all kings. They don't need one man in the palace. They all are kings in the land. So that's a fourth dimension.
So, what should we say is the problem with the tribes of Africa? Is it
So the tribes of Africa, there is what we call
families
metamorphosis. So we will have to allow metamorphosis, and metamorphosis comes with the kind of education or exposure. The first question I answered, the kind of exposure they will. Can we have a Mount Sinai? Can we raise a mountain of education higher to give the practical part, to give the actual touch and feel, so that the more people learn, the more they are tolerant to each other and the more they appreciate the giftedness, various and unique gifts in each individual. And so they begin to look at each other as bricks building one house as opposed to looking at each other as enemies. So it has to do with growing. And growth is facilitated by the information, the kind of knowledge which brings transformation. If we only grow by years that we are now 94, 96, 91, and we are not being transformed, then eventually we are just old but not mature. So mature people have a level of tolerance that kids don't have. So what you see in Africa are kids bickering, just as chicks in a brooder or any, how they would fight. So maturity gives peace. When we grow into mature people, we appreciate peace. When we are young, we always facilitating wars. We like fighting, bickering, because we are still too young to appreciate one another's contribution to our well-being, our progress, and so on and so forth.
One very last question about education. here in Africa, we have very many people who have graduated from school. Most of them, they have been taken to those outside countries, others are working in industries, they have developed renewable energy and all that, and all other things. To some extent, I would appreciate that our education at some level encourages or empowers people to be productive. To some extent, not to the best. But why is it that all of these people after graduating, none of them would appreciate the idea of now setting up now bigger projects, big dreams, businesses and companies?
It's a mindset and self-discovery. When you go to school to discover you appreciate everything around you. But when you go to school to find ideas to survive, then you pile up ideas and then you look for the best environment where you can survive. Those who learn to discover themselves doesn't end at your physique. It is the environment, the world you live in, the land, the language, the culture, the literature. So when I study, the reason why I would appreciate to be an African Ugandan and to stay here forever, because these nations that now we admire have had scholars like us. Now, my contribution to Africa is that scholarly touch. If I run away and say I can teach Spain when Spain is already has had its own scholars and they have done well, then I cheat. I'm simply saying that God made a mistake to having raised me as an African and given me the mind he has given me. So we simply have not to teach the kind of the so-called patriotism which is mainly political. Everyone is pulling to their side. We need to look beyond the politicking and look at the land we have as a gift and how much we can do with it as a gift. So God say, I'm taking you to the land flowing with milk and honey. And God had to let the enemy stay there so that they can fight and have that sense that we really fought. We shed our blood for this. So they have that kind of this thing we worked. So Africans have to appreciate, in as much as many of them came as wanderers, time comes when you begin to redefine yourself and appreciate the fact that you were born in this land as a gift to you, and you are a gift to that land, so that whatever you do, you contribute. You look at how to turn Africa into the best land where you would wish to go for a holiday, for tourism, so on and so forth. If that mind is inculcated, is planted, because it has to be planted from the day one when a child goes to school. The first thing they must teach them is their nation, their land, not in the political way where people are taught political parties and colors, and that they end up saying, oh no, movie, this one is evil, this one is good. That one divides us. All these political actors, they are just like teams. Some are substitutes still seated, others are just playing. When they score, whether from opposition or from that, we need these brains to debate and deliberate. So when we begin to create enmity, we kill talent, we kill gifts, and people begin to look at their nation as not so a blessing, just as a curse. A chance comes, they look for a green card, and they go where 400 years scholars sat, teachers looked for what to teach, agriculturists and engineers found a kind of designs for and to build bridges. So we go to the finished because we think ours cannot be changed, and we don't. So the first education man should be helping him, focusing him on self-discovery. And self-discovery is not, as I said, individual discover himself, but rather appreciating the world around him. And it's a gift not because of papers, it's a gift not because of anything. It's a gift that God, the Bible says in Acts 17, predetermined the nations and their borders and their times. So we are not in Africa because of anyone. We're in Africa because God has found the right people to be in Africa. And all things that Africa needs to be a great nation before it was divided into small of 54 countries, states or countries, we have them. We are all born gifted to suit and to meet the needs of the land where we are born. And this must be taught. It's not math, it's not physics, it's not biology. It must be taught. That knowledge comes from the Bible truth. So thank you.